Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today, you're trying to become the President of the United States. Although every path to presidency is unique, some things are certain. To become president, you'll have to take chances, make tough choices, seize opportunities, and adapt as conditions change. You'll also likely need to win the Electoral College, which is how the United States elects its president. And you'll have to have some luck along the way. Election Night is an educational strategy game for 2 players or teams. It has 2 versions of play, using either addition or multiplication, plays in 35 or 50 minutes respectively, for ages 8 and up, and published by Semper Smart Games. The game uses the uniquely numbered Play Smart dice system to produce harder to learn sums and products, then assigns the most valuable Electoral College states to the operations they know from learning apps that people forget the most. The repeated targeting of these combinations in tactile strategic play results in players being able to master addition facts and multiplication tables in as little as 3 games, while they also learn US geography and the mechanics of the Electoral College. Now, even though this is an election game, it is not politicized in any way. Today, we'll be doing a rule school where I'll teach you how to set up and play the game so that you don't have to read the rulebook yourself. Now, I've placed timestamps below me in the description of this video just in case you want to jump to a specific section of the rules. Without further ado, let's get started. Election Night is an educational strategy game for 2 players or teams where you're trying to be the President of the United States by winning the 270 Electoral College votes. There's 2 versions of the game. There's an addition game where you're rolling dice and choosing specific sums to then mark off states on the map. But each roll of the dice has many choices for strategic play. It also helps with learning geography, and you have tough choices as to winning a state right away or working towards one that's worth a lot of Electoral College votes. There's also a multiplication version of the game on the back of the board where you'll have options to re-roll dice, and you'll have different strategy cards that you'll play at certain points in the game. And there's some advanced variants that allow you to add and subtract certain dice to give you more possible options. So let's see if you can use math to control the right states at the right time in order to be the next President of the United States. Election Night has 2 versions of the game, addition game and multiplication game. I'm going to first teach you how to set up and play the addition game. Now this is the easier of the 2 games to teach and to play, so even if you want to move quickly onto the multiplication game, you'll need to watch this section of the rules first, because many of the mechanisms in the game will hold true in the multiplication game that we won't go over again in that section. To set up, you'll place the board in the middle of the table with the addition game side facing up. Next, you're going to find the right set of dice to use for this game. You'll notice that there are 6 total dice in the game. 2 of the sets of dice have just blue numbers on the entire dice. 2 other dice have just red numbers all over the dice. 2 others have a mix of blue and red. The ones that are like this, that are mixed blue and red, you can remove and place back in the box for now. You're only going to be using the 2 dice that are all blue and the 2 dice that are all red. The blue dice have the numbers 3 through 8, each number occurring twice, and the red dice have numbers 4 through 9, each number occurring twice. You're either going to split up into 2 teams, or you're going to be playing with 2 players. The youngest player will get to either choose their team color, blue or red, or if they let the other team choose the color, they'll be the first one to roll. So whoever chooses which color they want to be, the other team's going to get the first turn in the game. The object of the game is to be the President of the United States, and to do so, you want to be the first to get to 270 electoral votes, and you'll be tracking this on the board by coloring in little dots that I'll show you later by using the actual markers right on the board. In this case, the blue team or player has gotten all the way to 270, where the red team was almost there. Now each team or player is going to go back and forth until one of them does reach that 270 Electoral College votes. So let's talk about how a turn works. On your turn, you're going to roll all 4 dice. Then you're going to choose sums. Now you have lots of choices here. For example, let's say this is what we rolled. You could choose to add up the 5 and the 6 to give you an 11, and the 7 and 8 to give you a 15. So you have 11 and 15. Then based upon those sums, you'd find those states on the board. Now here we have 11, that was one of the numbers, and you'll see all these states here have the number 11, and it's all purple so they'll be easier to see out on the board. For example, Washington is here, and it's also right here in the same color matches. Now what this tells you is New York is also there, and this has 29 electoral college votes, where Alaska has just 3. Now the states that have the smaller amounts are easier to win, and the ones that have higher amounts are harder to win. For example, let's say we wanted to go for Nebraska. We see here, Nebraska is just a single circle. And let's assume this was the red team. Since it's a single circle, they could color this in, and they have basically won that state. And when a state is won, you'll look for that on the side of the board, and you'll also color in that star with your color, just like that. Now this gives you 5 electoral college votes. And those 5 electoral college votes are shown here by them coloring those in. Now, when you get to the end of the row, you simply start a new row, and if you have both of these rows finished, then you have 50 electoral college votes, and so on and so forth, 100, 150, 200, and you're trying to get to the 270. However, instead of going after and winning Nebraska for 5 electoral college votes, maybe you want to try to win Washington, which is 12. Now here has a triangle. So what you'll do is you'll color in any area that's not colored in there. See, there's 3 areas in that triangle. Now let's say a little bit later, the blue team also was able to color in one of the Washington spots of the triangle. Then whoever gets the 3rd one will win this state, and you'll score accordingly as I showed you before. However, even if the other team or player does not have anything colored in there, as soon as you have a guaranteed majority, meaning 2 out of the 3 possible spaces, then you would win that state and you would score accordingly. Which in this case would mean crossing off Washington and giving yourself 12 electoral college votes. And to show you, some states will have a pentagon, and the first team or player to get 3 of those pieces colored in will automatically win it. And on the nonagon, the first one to get 5 marks colored in will win that, regardless of if there's marks from the other team or not. So if you remember, we chose the sums of 11 and 15. And so for each of those, 1 state in 11 and 1 state in 15, you'll go ahead and mark off the states as I just showed. Again, only 1 state you're marking off of each of those sums. And keep in mind, it has to be completely full or won a majority before you actually get to cross off that state and get those electoral college votes. But you could have decided to have this choice in having a sum of 12 and a sum of 14, and then you'd be changing the states that you're actually trying to win. Or maybe you're doing it for a state of 13 and another state of 13. And if that was the case, you could go after any of these states twice. And in this instance, you could completely win Nevada and completely win Maine, with both of those 13s winning a total of 10 electoral college votes. Or maybe you decide to draw 2 of the spots here in Texas because we got 2 13s, or maybe 1 here and winning Nevada. It's totally up to you how to spend those. And when looking for which states go with which sums, the odd numbers are always on the left and the even numbers are on the right. So after you've rolled the dice and you choose your sums and picked your states and possibly tallied your electoral college votes, then it's simply the next player's turn. Well, they'll do the same thing. They'll take these dice, they'll roll them, and continue the same process. And this continues until one team or player has gotten to 270 electoral college votes. Now there are some other more advanced ways to play the addition game, but I'm going to cover those at the end of this video. Now I'm going to teach you how to set up and play the multiplication version of election night. You'll start by placing the board on the side that says multiplication game. Now when choosing your color, not only do you take the marker of your color, you'll also take the 12 election night cards of that color. Now keep in mind, I'm not going to show you how the game works in general because it works the same way as the addition game. I'm only going to show you the differences, so if you've skipped directly to this multiplication game, you're going to want to go back and watch the addition game rules. For the multiplication game, you're going to use a different set of dice than you did for the addition game. If you remember, there's 2 dice that are all red, 2 dice that are all blue, and 2 that are multicolored. In the multiplication game, you're going to take 1 die that's all blue, one die that's all red, and both dice that have multiple colors on them, meaning both blue and red. Which means that you're going to have one die that's all blue and one die that's all red that's going to go back in the box. You won't need it for the multiplication game. Now the object of the game is still the same. You're trying to get 270 electoral college votes first. Now on your turn, like normal, you're going to roll the dice. However, in the multiplication game, there's an additional optional step where you can re-roll. The player or team can then choose to re-roll any number of these dice, between 1 and 4 of them. However, if you do select multiple dice, you have to re-roll them all at the same time. So let's say I re-rolled these 2 dice. I got this blue 7 again, and in this case, I got a 9. Then you would select a product, and that's basically multiplication. In this case, we could say 6 times 8 is 48, and 7 times 9 is 63. So we'd have 48 and 63. And just like the addition game, you would look at the states for 63, look at the states for 48, and you'd be able to basically make a mark on one state of each of those, just like the addition game. Or maybe you wanted to do 6 times 7, which is 42, and 8 times 9, which is 72. So you'd be looking at the states that have the numbers 42 and 72. Or maybe you wanted to do 6 times 9, 54, and 8 times 7, 56. So you'd be looking at states of the numbers 54 and 56. Now, the rest of the game is played the same way. However, when choosing products, you have the option of using one of the strategy cards that you started the game with. For example, let's say even after our normal reroll, we didn't like our dice, we could play this card that says reroll 1 times. This means that we could take any number of these dice and reroll them 1 more time. Now, anytime you use a strategy card, it's only a one-time use, it goes out of the game for good, and you can only play 1 card per turn. The reroll 2x does the same thing as the other card did, except you can reroll up to twice. If you use the wild card, you can change any one of these dice to any other value. So for example, let's say we didn't want this 6, we want it to be a 7. Now we have 63 for that product. You have multiple cards that have a single number on it. This targeted campaign ad, when you play one of those, it just assigns this value to any one of the 4 dice that you want. For example, I can make this 7 a 6 instead of a 7. Now the get out the vote add or subtract card allows you to use dice to add or subtract before you multiply them. Now normally this would be 3 times 4, 12, 6 times 9, 54. However, we could say 3 plus 4 is 7, and then that 7 could either be multiplied by the 6, being a 42, or the 7 times the 9, a 63. Now the die that you don't use does not get to be used this way, so this flexibility makes it so that you only will cross off 1 state this turn. Now if you use it as a subtract, you could say 9 minus 3, for example, is 6, and then you can use that 6 times 6 is 36, or 6 times 9, 54, for example. And just like the addition game, after you've chosen your products, you're going to pick your states and color them in and possibly get electoral college votes just as before. And the game would just go to the next player's turn, just like the addition game. And if the game ever ends in a tie, the player or team who won the most states wins, including the District of Columbia. Now let's look at some other ways to play the multiplication game. If you want a quicker game, you can play the first to 200 electoral college votes. There's also a bonus 12 version, which after you use the normal products, like 6 times 4 would do 24, 8 times 9 would be 72. After that, you get a bonus move if you can add or subtract dice to be 12. In this case, 8 plus 4 is 12. So let's put those next to each other. This would be 12. You can use that 12 times 6 or times 9 to get that product and cover that state on the board as well as a bonus. So in this case, you could use the 12 times 6 to get the 72. The 12 times a 9 is 108, and that's not actually on the board, so you would use that other one. Now earlier I mentioned there's other ways to play the addition game. One of them is you can use the same re-roll step that you use in the multiplication game to give you some more options, and you could use the election night strategy cards as well. Another way to play is using addition and or subtraction of some or all dice to achieve up to 2 desired results. For example, you could take 9 and 7 and add that to 16, and then take this 5 and subtract it from this sum of 16 to use an 11. So you'd be doing a 16 and 11. Another example would be to add up the 5, the 6, and the 7 together, which is 18, and then minus the 9 to give yourself a 9. Now note, you can't just use a 9 as a single die because you have to use an operation of multiple dice in order to get that 9. Another option is similar to before where we added 5, 6, and 7 to use 18 as one of the numbers. You could then add 5 and 6 alone to give yourself an 11 for the second number. Now notice we did use these dice twice in this, but they were for two different numbers. For each operation, you can only use each die once. So in this version, a player is much less constrained, and there can be a lot of doubling up on the same number choices to target a specific state. Well, I hope this helped you dive right into election night and get to the fun quicker than you normally would if you had to read the rulebook yourself. Now, if you have further questions about the rules, I've placed a link below me in the description of this video, and that's the best place to ask them since I'll be notified, but also so will Semper Smart Games.